How many registrations, Bridget?
52, I think.
Okay. Perfect. Hi, everybody. If you're just joining now, we're just going to wait for a few more people to join. Thanks for joining us. We'll get going in a minute.
Nice to see a few familiar names in the attendees coming into the meeting.
Yeah, fantastic.
And is Jade joining us today, Jackie?
No, she'll join us for the next session we hold.
Sounds good.
Welcome, everybody, as you're joining. Thanks for joining us today. Some familiar names popping up there. We're just giving people a minute or two. It's lunchtime. You might have grabbed some lunch to grab that before we get started. Just give it one more minute. Thanks. We will be recording today's session as well. So if you do need to check back on something, feel free to ask us for that recording.
I'll have to put in an extra special effort then.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, everybody, we probably will get going now. Thanks very much for joining. My name is Jackie McEwen. I'm the Program Director here at Business Renewables Centre Australia. I'm here with my team. I've got Bridget Weston, who is our Project Officer, and John Prendergast, one of our Technical Directors. So we're going to talk to you today about the Buyers Group program that we are running. This is the third in our series of initial webinars around the Buyers Group, really just to tell you a little bit about what the Buyers Group is doing and to tell you a little bit of information about it so that you can decide whether or not it might be for you. So just before I get started today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which everyone meets today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And for us here today, we're based in Sydney. We're based at UTS in Sydney. If you're ever in the neighbourhood, feel free to pop in and say hi. And today it's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation that we particularly pay our respects to in Sydney. If you're new to BRC-A, then we can share a little bit about our knowledge here today with you, particularly around renewable energy purchasing, especially via power purchase agreement. So we've been around for about 7 years now, and we were established with funding support from ARENA, Queensland, Victorian and New South Wales state governments. We're an independent not-for-profit, and we develop and deliver training and resources and connection and information for organisations looking at purchasing renewable energy, large-scale off-site renewable energy in particular, but we do have resources for other types of renewable energy available as well. So I'll jump into it because we've got a bit to get through today. So we've had a little bit on who we are. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what the Buyers Group is and why we're running one. We're going to talk to you about what the opportunity is and why you would join a Buyers Group. A little bit around the basics on what are PPAs in case anyone is new to PPAs, which is perfectly fine. That's why we run our training. Who's doing them and why? Then I'm going to hand over to Jonathan, who's going to share a little bit around some case studies so you can understand how Buyers Groups work, who's been doing them. Then we're going to talk through what the procurement process will be for this Buyers Group and how we'll get started and next steps, and then how you can express your interest in participating. Just wanted to acknowledge as well that we have Jade Fennell on the line from the City of Sydney. And the City of Sydney is a really important partner in this project. Next slide. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Bridget. We've been provided with a grant from the innovation grant process that the City of Sydney runs to form a buyers group for renewable energy. And interestingly, buyers groups have really grown in recent years, but they can be a little bit challenging in these sort of early stages, getting things going and connecting with other organisations. So that's what we're doing in this project. We're really pulling the group together and getting you in touch with each other and providing you with templates so that you can progress with a buyers group purchase. So like I said, we're establishing the group. We're going to provide some education and support for a potential purchase of renewable electricity by all of the participants. We're going to support the group to engage energy and legal consultants, so we won't be providing those services. We'll be leaving it to the group to choose the right consultants for them. And like I mentioned, we will also provide some templates for you to get going. Next slide. Thanks, Bridget. So what is the opportunity? Why would you do a buyers group or an aggregation project? And we're going to run through, I guess, a lot of the points around that in a minute. But in particular, I guess it's good to look at what are some of the things that people have said about buyers groups. And these are organisations who've participated in various buyers groups of their own. Fulton Hogan, a construction firm, saying project that they joined, which was the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project, enabled them to power all of their quarries, asphalt plants and blending facilities across Victoria with renewable carbon neutral electricity. So that's obviously very much a sustainability driver for them. ISPT said that through their collaboration, they secured long-term electricity that delivers value for their investors and significantly reduces carbon emissions across the portfolio. So that's fantastic. And then in another type of buyers group, which we'll detail a bit later, Lion Breweries, together with Australian Hotels Association, with Lion as the anchor partner, which provided the basis for a group deal, which involved the Australian Hotels Association members, so 50 or so pubs and clubs. So it's quite positive what people are saying about buyers groups. So just moving on to the next slide there, we'll take a little step back and just understand about PPAs more generally. So who's doing PPAs and why? So we keep a track of all the corporate PPA deals made in Australia over 5 gigawatt hours per annum, and some of the smaller ones as well. And this deal tracker, as you can see, Energetics, they're a consultancy who does a lot of work in this space. They've produced a beautiful graph here as well, taking us back to 2017 and looking at all of those PPAs. So lots of big names there. You won't be able to actually see those names in detail here, but if you're interested, just jump on our website or also on Energetics website, and you can have a look at some of those big companies. But suffice to say, you've got companies like Telstra, BHP, Wesfarmers, Woolies, Westfield, and then more recently, Equinix, La Trobe University. A lot of the universities have done PPAs. Rio Tinto, those big red blocks on the right-hand side there. Various airports, IFM, investors, as well as North Queensland airports, Newcastle Airport, etc. So lots of big organisations. PPAs are also relevant to smaller organisations, particularly service-oriented, such as Bupa and HSF, who've also executed PPAs. Next slide, Bridget. So why? What do they do? So what is a PPA? A PPA is simply a contract between an energy buyer and energy seller where there's a guarantee that that energy is going to be purchased from a renewable energy, so solar or wind farm project. And they also differ from your standard electricity contracts in that there is an agreed price and a volume and a term. Usually you might have a price but certainly a term and also that volume, really important aspects of a PPA. So there are benefits to PPAs, both for the corporates buying the PPA and the developers or retailers selling those. So on the sell side, retail PPAs enable projects to be financed because they're essentially a bankable contract. When they have an offtake agreement with a corporate, they're able to take that to the bank and say, I'd like to build this solar or wind farm. And therefore, they're able to obtain that project finance and build it. In terms of corporates and what the benefits are, it's all about decarbonisation, especially your scope 2, obviously your electricity emissions, but also reaching a little bit now with electrification into scope 1 and also into supply chain, particularly through group deals. But they enable organisations to achieve large emissions reductions very quickly. They also can help you to manage your price fluctuations. I'll come to that in a moment. And also to deliver some social, environmental, economic benefits. Reputational benefits feature when we survey the industry each year as one of the reasons why organisations do PPAs. Very important for, obviously, corporate reputation and corporate values. Next slide. So PPAs can achieve large emissions very quickly. Basically, if you're estimating your scope 2 emissions, your electricity emissions each year, you might be doing a little bit of rooftop solar, which brings those emissions down, a bit of energy efficiency, which brings them down even further, maybe even some demand management. And then you might also have a little bit of new demand. Maybe you've acquired another site or expanded your team. So you've got this remaining set of emissions. And essentially one PPA contract can basically take you back to zero in terms of those emissions. So it's a very, I guess, simple approach in terms of just having sort of one tool that you're able to access and utilise to get to that point. Thanks, Bridget. They also help you to manage energy price fluctuations. So you no doubt will have noticed that your retail electricity pricing has jumped around quite a bit in the last few years, more than just the last few years. And so over a period of maybe 10 years, your contract, maybe it's a 1 to 3 year contract, maybe it's a rolling contract, it will probably jump around that sort of price scale throughout that period. It might stay the same for the first 1 to 3 years, bump up a bit, jump down a bit, causing you a little bit of uncertainty around your pricing. So what a PPA can do, and in this case, a 7-year plus PPA, it locks in that price for that whole period. So you know exactly what you're going to be paying. It's one of the reasons they've become very popular, particularly with councils and other organisations where they like to know exactly what that's going to be. And obviously, importantly, you'd like that price to be a low price. And next slide, thanks, Bridget. And we know that this is important because we know that volatility will continue to be a feature of electricity pricing as we move forward in the energy transition. It's impossible to avoid discussion around the energy transmission in the media everywhere you go, really nowadays. And we know that there are multiple factors affecting that electricity pricing. International factors as well as local factors. Locally, there's a little graphic there showing the closure of coal-fired power stations. And those are planned closures, so we know they're going to happen. And basically when this happens, that means that the price will bump around. Lots of other factors affecting that. And on the right there, a little graphic there showing an extreme price event that occurred in 2022, where prices went well beyond where they're expected to be. So it's very difficult, no matter how good you are at anticipating the market, to be able to really know that those things are going to happen. They can be very costly. Just moving forward. Thanks, Bridget. So that's a bit about PPAs in general. So what is the opportunity if you do a PPA and it's actually in a group? So participating in a group allows you a number of benefits. So essentially, as we said, it can help you to manage that long-term energy cost risk and reduce reduce your exposure to that wholesale market. You can reduce emissions and other associated carbon liabilities and meet your corporate net zero or decarbonisation targets. So whatever targets you're trying to meet, maybe you've signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, or maybe some other, maybe climate active, some popular ones. Can also position you as a company that is a leader in sustainability. So whilst a good number of companies have done PPAs, there's still plenty that haven't as yet. So you'd be one of the ones joining a group and participating as a leader. Can strengthen the corporate brand, I guess that follows. And then it's also, I guess, a benefit that you're contributing to the grid. So you are supporting new investment in renewables, ideally in a group, if you can achieve that additionality, and also benefits for the local regional communities. Fantastic sorts of potential benefits that could be delivered there. So that's that in a nutshell. I'm just going to hand over now to my colleague, John Prendergast, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the opportunity and some case studies. Thanks, JP.
Thanks, Jackie. And just checking you can hear me okay. Excellent. Nodding from Bridget. Yeah, I think to try and really wrap your head around where this could end up, it's kind of interesting to think through what would be the tagline or what would be the media release of that final result. So we thought we would do that for this presentation to help everyone understand what the results may be. So what is the opportunity? So in one case on the left, we say 12 New South Wales-based companies combine in corporate PPA to support a new regional 5 megawatt solar farm. So that is possible to achieve additionality, where the efforts result in new renewable energy capacity being invested in and financed that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. Therefore, a direct relationship with reduction of emissions, especially in New South Wales with such a coal-dominated grid still. Alternatively, it might be that 10 Australian companies go 100% renewable with green power play. And let's focus on additionality, more on green power. Both are great outcomes. We have to be realistic that for businesses with smaller energy demands and energy budgets, there's simply doesn't make sense to go and undertake a very complex procurement and negotiation process of negotiating with a corporate PPA with a solar farm. And we can see here that Ambulance Victoria, Fox Studios and the MCG went and signed green power together in a joint effort. And just sort of going through that a bit more, what kind of impact can you achieve? So if the buyers group, company A, has 2 gigawatt hours demand annually, that's around $300,000-400,000 a year of electricity. If 5 companies combine, that would be 10 gigawatt hours, and that's almost what a 5 megawatt solar farm makes annually. So therefore, if they made that effort and signed that PPA with a new solar farm, that would be 10,000 tonnes per annum of emissions reductions as a group, and it support a $10 million investment in new renewable capacity, and that would be an Australian first. But if they go alone, then it's a 2 gigawatt hour company. They're more likely to land in a green power retail PPA deal. And 2,000 tonnes per annum emissions reductions. But in this case, no direct investment or renewable energy capacity, no additionality, and an Australian first claim. So this is just an example of the additional impact that can be gained by doing it as a group rather than as an individual. Some slides from the City of Melbourne. So City of Melbourne have undertaken or led 2 group PPAs. So we're certainly leveraging their excellent work. And they produced this graph or illustration to try and unpack some of the benefits and objectives of group PPAs in a buying group. So starting from the inside, there is more collective decision-making, cooperation and coordination between the group members, and shared effort and costs. So typically transaction costs end up being under 1 or 2% of the overall cost of the energy contract, but we know everyone's sensitive to, $20,000 consultant quote or legal cost and so on. So sharing these sorts of costs can be a key advantage of groups and help everyone progress the deal internally by sharing those upfront transaction costs. And they say corporate PPAs are 70% education, having to educate all your managers and executive how the energy market works. So the group members get a lot of benefit on sharing what's worked internally at their organisations and so on. Moving outwards, we can get, back on that previous slide. We can achieve greater scale through aggregation. That can include more competition or sharper pricing, or achieve greater impact. Then on the very outside, sharper pricing from that additional scale, sharing the workload and expertise, reducing the risk and negotiate better terms, so a bit of power in numbers, and attract more offers and have more choice. Thank you. So MREP 1 was one of the first ever corporate PPAs in Australia, and still one of the most complex ones, with 13 different organisations. We've got a post office, a couple of universities, 3 councils, some banks, a zoo, all grouped together, and that they ran a tender process and landed with a retail contract with Tango, who and their deal was supported by the finance of a new wind farm, the Crowlands wind farm. So fantastic outcome for that group. What's 140 jobs during construction, 8 jobs during operations, 39 turbines, and 96,800 tonnes saving per annum. On to the next slide. And then they did it again, this time a bit more planned and deliberate, and really showing some great expertise. And that landed in a group that included CBOS Property, civil contractors, Fulton Hogan, Deakin University, ISPT, Mondelez and RMIT. And Tango won that contract again, and another 110 gigawatt hours, 100% renewables. So a fantastic outcome again. My final slide before throwing back to Jackie, I think, if I got my numbers right. So a couple more case studies. So Lion Brewery are obviously a very large energy customer and could do a PPA on their own, but they chose to do a supply chain PPA and bring along a lot of smaller energy customers, hotels, to participate in the deal that they brokered, and that landed in a 10-year retail PPA with Engie / Simply Energy. And it was Australia's first supply chain PPA, and they achieved significant savings for those hotels who are benefiting from Lion's expertise and scale. Another one was SS Rock, the Southern Sydney region of councils, 25 New South Wales councils together, adding to 214 gigawatt hours. That landed in a 4.5-year retail PPA with a 4-year option with Zen Energy. And in their media release, they commented that they've achieved both fantastic sustainability and financial outcomes from that. And that retail PPA is backed by PPAs from Moree Solar Farm, Nevertire Solar Farm, and Hillston Solar Farm in New South Wales.
Great, thanks very much, JP. So some really great examples there. And so the idea with our buyers group will be that, as I mentioned before, we'll be providing particularly the upfront support, and basically taking the group through this initial stage. So we're going to be helping to essentially form the buyers group at the start, and develop a bit of a memorandum of understanding amongst the group. And what the purpose of that is really to help organisations to be able to make decisions together. So it would be a group decision-making process, but for group benefit and for individual company benefit. We're going to be running some PPA education sessions. So we gave you just a little taste of what and the why, but there's, I guess, a little bit more to it than that, of course, with PPAs, and particularly around internal support building. And that's obviously one element where organisations really need some support. And we've got a number of helpful tools, CFO pitch decks and things like that, to help you with that sort of thing. And that's usually required sort of throughout the process. So setting you up to be able to do that. And then in stage 2, we'll be supporting the group by providing templates and a scope. So developing the scope for a request for quote process from energy and legal consultants. So the group will be able to go out and I noted there was a question there from Patricia from Core Markets. Thanks. As we mentioned previously, we won't provide the consultancy role. We're just really here in the background to provide the support and the education role throughout and the communications role throughout those first couple of stages. The group will then engage legal and energy consultants, and they will then be guided by those consultants through a go-to-market process. So a procurement process going out to tender for a deal, probably very similar to one of the ones that, that Jonathan talked through. And so going through that sort of procurement process and then through to financial or project close anyway for the buyers group deal. So if that is with more than likely it would be with for a retail PPA, given the different sorts of players that we're likely to be having in the group and the indications that we've had from potential participants already. It'll be a mixed group, not unlike those City of Melbourne groups that we mentioned before, but obviously getting those goals aligned in the early stages will be really important. Thanks, Bridget. On the next slide, please. So how will the group get started? So as I mentioned, today's the third of these initial introductory webinars. Following that, we're going to run the educational sessions. So we're going to help the group understand basics about the electricity market and PPAs in general, going into a bit more detail. We're going to help you to understand how you currently procure electricity. You might already know or might not. Your retailer, or maybe you have multiple retailers for multiple sites, maybe even in multiple states, which is also fine. And your annual load size, so your annual electricity usage. And that's for each potential participant. So you're not signing on any dotted line at this stage. It's really about just working with the group and understanding how the opportunity sits for you and your organisation. Obviously, we're going to seek interest from other potential like-minded businesses and market this opportunity to the group. So we're doing a lot of that right now. We're going to establish that governance structure. So really, terms of reference, really folding into an MOU there, agreeing some common objectives so that when you go to the decision-making around, once you've received those tenders, it'll be easier for you to make those decisions because you'll have developed that decision-making structure and process already. So that will speed up that process. And then obviously we're going to do those other sort of education facilitating groups. So that MOU on the right, it's basically just it's an agreement, a non-binding agreement governing that relationship between the participants, really outlining how you work together and really providing that basis for the rest of the process. So moving on to the next slide. Thanks, Bridget. So who can join the buyers group? So this is our first buyers group, not the first one we've been involved in as individuals, but it's BRC-A's first official buyers group. And so this group would ideally consist of medium to small energy user organisations. So probably in that sort of 5 to 50 or 60 gigawatt hours per annum, but some potential for being as low as 1 gigawatt hour. Some of the organisations who've already expressed their interest are down in that much smaller end, and we've got a couple of bigger ones up that higher end. So quite a big spread. We may actually end up with 2 groups depending on how different the participants and the interested people are, which I think could actually work really well. Really will depend on what the group wants to do. We're really here as a facilitator. They can be public or private organisations. And ideally you've set or you're planning to set or looking at setting sustainability target. That's probably fairly important because having that sort of alignment between your goals here, obviously price will likely be another goal, but certainly I think, you know, if you're looking at reducing your carbon emissions and have some idea for what you want to do that, that will give you, you know, that position of alignment with the rest of the group. And ideally, obviously, as it's a City of Sydney funded group and project, fabulous if you've got operations located within that LGA. But if you don't, City of Sydney is more than happy for us to accept people who have operations in Greater New South Wales. If you've also got operations in other states, that's absolutely fine. A lot of the, I guess, proponents, the group will likely be going to service all states across the national electricity market, so that shouldn't be a problem. So we're going to aim for a minimum group size of 25 gigawatt hours per annum, and that's what we've deemed to be, I guess, as a large enough load size to seek sufficiently competitive offers from the market. Next slide. Thanks, Bridget. So what's our broad timing? So we started back in April with some of these initial sessions, just letting people know what we're doing and how we're planning to go about supporting this group. We're still in that phase, really. I guess it's a recruitment phase for the group. And we've received a good number of strong interest from the market now. We're going to be doing asking participants then for their loads to understand what their load is in New South Wales and how that might fit into one or more groups. We're going to do a little bit of market sounding around that with some of the supply side, just to understand how the group might best be structured in order to attract the best offers from that market. And as I mentioned, we're going to be doing some PPA education workshops. Those will probably be coming up fairly soon in July. So this is this MOU. We're going to develop draft MOU. We will be basing that more than likely on the ones from the City of Yarra and City of Melbourne who've done group buys before, but with a few adjustments for this specific group. And then we'll be going in sort of August, possibly August, September, then to market to seek energy and legal consultants. So we'll help the group to develop that scope of works for that, for those consultants, and they will then appoint the energy and legal consultants who will help guide them through the rest of the process. So hopefully that makes sense. Just seeing if we've got any questions there. I saw we had a couple that we'd already mentioned, so that's all right. Here we go. Great. Okay, just a couple of comments there again from Patricia. Thanks very much. So so basically, if you are interested and if you have questions about it, please get in touch with us. We can have a chat. If you're not sure if you might fit into that group or if you meet those sort of broad criteria, if you feel like you possibly don't, but you're a little bit interested anyway, just give us a buzz to have a chat. We can also guide you to other information that can support you. If you're a small organisation, small low energy load organisation, we've just recently also, thanks to the City of Sydney, delivered some resources for business. Bridget, I'll just get you to jump down to slide 26 there, just a few forward from there. Sorry, I thought there we are. Last year, we delivered some masterclass training series on green power and LGCs for business, so particularly for smaller energy buyers. So if you're in that sort of 1 gigawatt hour per annum and smaller, that could be really helpful to you. And also we delivered a guide around power purchase agreements and how they work, particularly for that smaller end of the market. But they're just, I guess, a couple of examples. We've got sort of 20 plus resources on our website that you're able to access. Most of them are free, and if any of them you want to have a look at and you can't get access, just get in touch with us and we can give you a bit more information. So just back up to that slide. Sorry to jump around. Slide 23. Yeah. So once you've got in touch with us or via email, we will respond to you seeking, as I mentioned, a little bit more just high-level information around your electricity load and where your operations are located in Australia, particularly in New South Wales. Then we will pool and model those loads and gain a little bit of an understanding around how the group might look, the group or groups that we end up with. And then we'll get back in touch with you about participating in the group and what those next steps are, a bit of information about that PPA basics training for the participants that we're going to be holding sort of towards the end of this month and probably more into August. So we've got another question there that someone has popped into the chat, which we can address now. We've hit the sort of Q&A phase. So Sharon asks, how does the PPA work with multiple contracts, with contract end dates prior to rolling into the PPA? So this is a really common situation. Even within an organisation, you might have multiple contracts with multiple end dates. And this is something that electricity retailers in this space are really quite familiar with dealing with and bringing those basically online, potentially with a bridging contract in the interim, but bringing you online when those contracts end. JP, was there anything you wanted to add to that response there?
Yeah. I think it would be ideal to line up the end dates so we're all starting this new PPA at the same time. Yeah. Some of the proponents that respond to the tender might be happy to have different start dates. And it kind of depends on the final deal as well. But yeah, extending your current retailer 6 or 12 months to match up with everyone else or entering into just a bridging 1-year deal is quite a manageable task as well.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. So, yeah, there are a couple of different approaches there that can be taken, but it is something that they are quite familiar with dealing with. No problem. Thanks, Sharon. So any other questions? I guess some organisations like to know how long it might take and maybe how much involvement you might need to have. And that will really depend very much on how motivated the group is. So if everyone is really keen to get things moving, as we'd encourage, the sooner you go out to market, the sooner you can know what your procurement is going to be and by what date you can meet your targets. Another question, I guess, is around, what's the availability like out there in the market? There's been a bit of a sort of a scarcity issue of available offtake, available solar and wind. That situation seems to be easing now. It seems to be quite a good time by all accounts. There's a little bit more availability out there in the market, which obviously also helps with the pricing. And so they're just a few of the other sorts of considerations that some people have been talking to us about. Jonathan, any other comments or questions that you've had that you want to share? Any thoughts on some of the questions that we've had from some of the group? Jonathan's project managing this project. I probably should have mentioned that up front, as well as being our technical director. So yeah, Jonathan, any particular comments or questions there that you might have received so far?
Yeah, typically these contracts are a little longer than a 1, 2 or 3 year or a rolling contract. So there was a fear about change in energy demand over time if the business grows or over time.
Yeah.
And that's certainly manageable. So if you say acquire or take up a new tenancy somewhere, or a new building, or acquire a new business, and you want it all to be in the same contract. And electricity retailers have a process called a roll-in or a roll-out of a new meter. We call them sites and meters rather than buildings or operations in the energy world. And that's normally a 1 or a 2-page form, an NIMI meter roll-in or roll-out. And that can happen at any time. That can be done under flexibility that's allowed in the contract, or it's just negotiated on updated pricing at that time. So let's say it's a 7-year electricity supply agreement, and this happens at year 4, and with 3 years to go, because the retailer hasn't gone and forward bought at that time for this new demand 4 years earlier, it might be updated market pricing at that time, but still able to be brought under the same agreement.
Yeah, that's great. It is definitely a common question. It's usually a sort of also a load flex with these sorts of agreements around that sort of 20% up or down. So if if your load increases or reduces by sort of 20%, that's usually quite easily captured. And then what happens if it's bigger or bigger than that is usually subject to negotiation as part of that contract. Depends a little bit from retailer to retail also. I was also just going to mention, so obviously we aren't going to share with you the names of the current interested participants, but the general types of companies that have expressed interest so far include professional services companies, financial service companies, hospitality organisations, manufacturing, property, and utilities. So they're all the sort of, I guess, key areas from which those organisations. If your organisation is completely different, in fact, even if you're a council or any other sort of organisation, just get in touch and ask the question, and we can let you know. But we're really not closing it off to anyone who's really interested. Just wanted to clarify as well, we are sending out quite a few communications about different projects at the moment. So if you joined this and you're in the Hunter and New England region, we are running totally separate sessions for Hunter and New England, nothing to do with Buyers Group. So just keep an eye out for those invites if you're in those regions. You're not excluded, however, from joining the Buyers Group. If you are in those regions, you're also welcome. That's great. So Patricia's just sending a bit more information. Any other final questions from the group? We whipped through it today. I think we barely made it last time. So, but not surprising for our third session. It means hopefully we've answered most of the questions in people's minds. But yeah, before we wrap up, we might wrap up just at 1:45. Any final questions? Here comes one. Are entities outside New South Wales eligible to join? Just drop us an email and we can have a chat about it. At this stage, hasn't been really listed, but it might be something we can certainly look at and have a chat with you. And there are lots of other sorts of projects going on around the country. So at the very least, we could guide you towards one of those. But if you are an entity that has, I guess, at least one in New South Wales, that's very easy. But yeah, beyond that, that's fine. Just get back in touch. That's great. Fantastic. And I will also, just for everyone, Patricia's also asked for my email address. Thought you had it, Patricia, but that's okay. So just typing that into there you go. Beautiful. Fabulous. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. If there are any final questions, feels like the end of an auction. Last chance.
Going once.
Going once, going twice. Thank you all very much for joining. Yeah, feel free to reach out and let us know your thoughts, questions, ideas, be fabulous. Thanks again. Bye.